If you're a first-time home buyer and you walk into a house, the easiest thing to do is to fall in love with the staging, the finishes, the paint color, the new kitchen cabinets, and that's all well and good. But today, I'm going to talk about what's going on behind all those beautiful finishes and countertops, and that is home inspections. Home inspections are one of the most integral parts of the home buying process, and if you don't get one, you're definitely selling yourself short, especially in today's market where buyers have a lot more power and a lot more negotiation to go ahead and get a home inspection before they buy. In today's video, I'm going to cover the 5 important mechanical systems that you should look out for on any home inspection and ways to catch problems with them before you buy. Let's get started. System number 1 of the 5 mechanical systems you want to check in your house before you buy it is the HVAC system. Now, for those who don't know, HVAC stands for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. This is one of the most expensive parts of any house, and it runs throughout the entire structure to keep the house hot or cool depending on the climate. So here's a couple things to look out for when you're looking at the HVAC system in your house. First thing you want to check for is the age of the unit. Now, the age of the unit is usually printed in an easy to find spot either on the compressor or the air handler, which are 2 of the major components of the HVAC system. If you see an HVAC system that has a manufacture date that's more than 10 years old, you might want to be careful because this could be an aging system, which could cause some maintenance problems in the future. The second thing you want to look out for is any maintenance or servicing records. Now, a lot of homeowners, when they get their HVAC system serviced, usually once or twice a year based on the changing of the seasons, a lot of them don't keep the records of that servicing history, so it can be kind of tough to figure out when the unit was serviced most recently. Now, one of the things I see on a lot of home inspection reports is that the inspector will recommend to have the HVAC system serviced, and this is mostly to cover their own butts, as well as to give the homeowner the opportunity to figure out what's going on with the AC system from a specialist. The next couple items to check for the HVAC system are the ventilation, ductwork, and the air filters. Now, the air filter is pretty easy to check. Usually you just need to find the return register, open it up, and take a look at the air filter. If the air filter is super clogged, just covered with dust and nastiness, that could mean that the current owners or the previous owners did not take good care of their AC system. That could mean for you as a potential buyer that you could see some issues down the line. Now, as far as the ductwork concerns, really it's tough to see what's going on inside of the ductwork, but you can easily take a peek up in the attic to see any of the exposed ductwork and the exterior of that to make sure that there's no kinks, holes, or any other issues that are readily apparent. Now, the last thing you should check with the HVAC system is pretty straightforward, and it's located right on the main wall of the house. I'm talking about the thermostat. You want to make sure that the thermostat is functioning properly. So what you can do is you can adjust the temperature to cause the heating portion of the system or the cooling portion of the system to kick on during the time that you're inspecting the house. Now, a home inspector is usually going to do this for you, but depending on the season, they may not test the part of the system that's not required. For example, in the summer, they'll definitely check the cooling part of the system, but they're not going to boot on the heat in the middle of the summer just to make sure it works. An HVAC system can be pretty expensive. I've seen prices range from anywhere from $6,500 on the low end to $17,000 on the high end, and that's depending on the type of unit and how big the square footage of the home is. In any case, if you look out for those 2 major indicators, which are age of the unit and any obvious leaks or problems with the unit, then you should be able to save yourself about $15,000 by not having to replace your unit. Let's move on to the second major system in a home that you should definitely check out before you buy, and that is the electrical system. Now, I understand, right, mechanical, electrical, kind of a misnomer, but in this case, the electrical system is another one of those things that can cause huge headaches and be a safety issue, as well as put a big ding in your wallet if you're not careful. The first thing you want to check when you're inspecting a home for the electrical system is the amperage rating. The amperage is the amount of energy that the provider is able to give to the home. Typically, a higher amperage rating means you can run more appliances and have more electrical loads running in your house than a lower amperage rating. Now, here in Charleston, South Carolina, the standard up-to-date amperage rating is going to be 200 amps for most of your residential homes. Anything less than that, so 100 amps or 75 amps, could be indicative of an outdated system, which may mean that you have to replace the electrical system. Now, if you're going to replace the entire electrical system in the whole house, we're talking about a new breaker box, a new electrical panel, pulling out all the wires, rewiring the whole house. That can run you upwards of $10,000. So make sure you check on the age and the system condition of the electrical system. The second thing you want to check for, other than the amperage rating on the exterior of the house at the meter, is you want to look at the breaker box. Now the breaker box is usually located in the garage or some hard to find place, so that it's not just sitting out in front of the living room for everyone to look at all the time. Big things here are, when you open up the electrical panel, you want to check to see if the panel looks to be in good condition, if it looks new, if it has any rust, or has any char marks. Those are big things that are going to be red flags, specifically for any overheating or char marks. That could be a fire safety issue, and you do not want to have your brand new house, burned down because of a bad electrical wiring. The third thing you want to check for when you're looking at the electrical system is any GFCI outlets. Now, GFCI stands for Ground Fault Circuit Interrupt, which is a little protection mechanism that is located in the actual outlet of some outlets. Typically, GFCI outlets are required in any areas that experience moisture, so bathrooms, kitchens, anywhere that's right around a faucet or a sink somewhere, and this is a safety issue as well. The function of these outlets is if they get any water or if they're grounded out for any reason, they will trip the outlet, which will cause that appliance, whatever's running from that outlet, to turn off immediately. The last major thing you want to look for if you're inspecting the electrical system is for any amateur or DIY work. Now, if you're in the business of renovating homes, then you know for a fact that the electrical system is one of the more important parts, and you want to make sure that you're getting any permits that are required if you're fiddling with the electrical system. Now, a lot of people, if they're going to add an outlet or install a ceiling fan, if it's a homeowner who's doing that, they may not pull the proper permits. Now, depending on the complicated nature of the electrical work, if it's a super simple thing like swapping out a light switch or swapping out an outlet, you may not need a permit for that type of thing. That's something that the average homeowner can usually handle on their own. But if you see any extensive electrical work that looks kind of janky or that looks like someone did it on their own, you want to make sure to get that checked out by a licensed electrician. Let's move on to the third system that you want to check out if you're inspecting your home, and that is the plumbing system. The plumbing system in a house is one of those things that if it's breaking or failing, it can cause a lot of damage over time, and it may not be caught right off the bat. Because most of the plumbing is located behind walls or under subfloors, it's not something that's going to be readily apparent just as you're walking through the house. That makes it even more important to make sure you get a very detailed plumbing and sewer inspection before you purchase your house. When I'm looking at the plumbing in a house, there's a couple things that I'm checking for. The first one is, what's the condition of the water heater? Again, a water heater is a larger portion of the water system, and it's a giant reservoir of water that if it fails could flood out a big portion of the house. So I want to make sure that the water heater is in good condition and that it's fairly new, usually within 5 to 6 years old. If it's any older than that, it could be worth negotiating for a price reduction or for the current owner to get it replaced. The next thing I checked for in the water system and the plumbing system is the water supply. Now, the water comes in from the street, from your utility provider, and it goes through a main water shutoff somewhere in the garage or maybe in the front yard. From there, it gets distributed throughout the house through a series of pipes, and it's those pipes that you want to look out for. Those water supply pipes can be made of a couple different types of materials. Nowadays, the popular ones to use are PEX and PVC. PEX and PVC are different types of plastic. PEX being the big one that's used by builders. It's really nice because it's flexible, easy to work with, and you can connect up the joints pretty easily. Older homes are going to have copper pipes or maybe PVC pipes. That's not a big issue that I've seen. I haven't seen a lot of copper pipe failures, but there is one type of piping that you should definitely look out for. This type of piping is called polybutylene piping. Polybutylene has a known failure rate, and in fact, is prohibited for use in current building code. This is because it has such a high failure rate that it was causing a lot of flood damage and a lot of water damage to various residential and commercial residences throughout the 80s and 90s. I think that the last time that polybutylene piping was allowed for use was in the early 90s or the late 80s. So if you're buying a house that was built in the late 80s or early 90s, you definitely want to check out the piping. Now, there's a couple ways that you can identify the type of piping, and they're pretty straightforward. The first one is check the color. If the piping is a grayish color, then that's most likely polybutylene piping, and you want to stay away from that, or at least get a quote for replacing that piping. The second color piping you want to look for is the red and blue piping that you see in a lot of houses today. So if you look under the sink, under the kitchen sink, or near where there's a toilet, anywhere where there's something that's going to be supplied with water, you can usually look and check the color of the piping there. If it's red or blue, or sometimes white, that means it's PEX or PVC piping, and that is A-OK. The third type of piping that you can identify is copper. Copper's going to be pretty straightforward. Copper is metal. It has that bronzy, coppery finish. And like I said before, copper doesn't have a lot of failure issues unless it gets very, very old, and in that case, sometimes you can have some little pinhole leaks. In any case, you want to look for any green portions of the piping if you're looking at copper to identify any slow leaks that maybe have developed over time. The last thing that I check for with the plumbing system on the supply side is I want to make sure that the water pressure is pretty good. Now, if the water pressure is low, that could mean that there's a leak somewhere in the water supply, or maybe there's a clog in the pipe somewhere. If the water pressure is high, that's awesome. But we don't want it to be too high, otherwise we could cause premature failure just because of the amount of stress that's put on the piping because of the higher water pressure. So on the plumbing side of things, we've talked about the water supply, but what about the water disposal? Now we're going to talk about the sewer system. And again, this is kind of a subset of the plumbing system in the house. Most sewer systems nowadays are made from PVC piping. And this is white piping. It's usually about 1.5 inches to 2 inches wide. And it's going to route all of the water from your drains, your toilets, your showers, out to the street to the main sewer system. Now, obviously, if you have a septic system, it's going to be a little bit different. But for this case, we're talking about a house that is supplied by the city or the county water and sewer. The things you want to look for on the sewer side of things are you want to find in the house where there's a spot where you can look inside of the sewer system. And I don't mean with your eyes. You want to get someone to scope the sewer system to make sure that there's not roots or other plants or any broken parts of the system that are impeding water flow from the house down to the street. One easy way to check for obstructions in the sewer system is just to run the water in the house and see if there's any slow draining pipes. Usually this happens in the shower or in a sink. Sometimes this is just because of lots of hair or shaving cream that's gone down the sink and is clogging up the drain, but it could be indicative of a bigger problem. So let's move on to system number 4 of the major mechanical systems that you should definitely check out before you buy a house. Now, this next system is the one that protects everything that's in the house, so it's super important to make sure that you know what you're looking for. And that system is the roof and attic. Now, the roof is the thing that actually protects the top of the house from anything that's falling. Typically, we think of water in the form of rain or other precipitation like snowfall. But the roof is important because if there's a hole in the roof or a leak, any water that enters the top of the house is going to filter its way all the way down and could cause tons of damage as it moves through the walls of your house trying to get to the ground. So here's what I look for in a roofing system. Like the other systems, I want to make sure that the roof is at least 10 years young. Anything older than a 10-year-old roof needs to be evaluated for replacement because it could lead to leaks over time. Now, the issue with determining the age of a roof is that typically when roofs are replaced, it's not like the roofer's just going to stamp a date of replacement on there. So you kind of have to guess unless the previous homeowner knows for sure when they replace the roof. As you're looking at the roof, there's a few things that you should check for. The first one is signs of aging, which can be identified by shingles that are either peeling or maybe broken, or that have some of the granules that are on top of the shingles. As the roof ages, those granules can start sliding off, which means there's going to be less protection on the roof. Other things to look for on a roof are damage to the roof, and that can be in the form of hail damage, missing shingles, or sometimes you can even get moss growth that squeezes up underneath some of the shingles. If you have moss or plant growth underneath the shingles, then that's going to allow an area for water to intrude into the house. The whole point of the roof is to divert water and other falling objects away from the interior of the house. So if there's any way for water to get under those shingles and into the house, that's a no-go. So those are things you can check from the outside of the house, but don't forget to look up in the attic on the underside of the roof as well. This is where you'll be able to see any evidence of previous water leaks, and those are usually found by big dark spots that are on the plywood that the shingles rest on top of. So if you're up in the attic, you want to make sure you look up and check for any dark circles or any water damage. That could be indicative of a failing roof and something that needs to be investigated. Now, the last thing you want to look for when you're checking out the roof is you want to make sure that the attic in general is well ventilated. This may seem counterintuitive, but a lot of the roof systems and a lot of the systems in the house need to have adequate ventilation to work properly. So if you go up in the attic and it's just unreal, sweltering hot, and you don't see any attic fans or anything that could actually move air or allow that space to breathe, that could also be a red flag that you need to get checked out before you buy the house. All right, we've covered 4 systems so far, so let's talk about the 5th system, which is the foundation or the crawl space. At this point, we've covered the house pretty much from top to bottom, and now we're going to cover the portion of the house that's underneath the bottom of the house, which is the foundation. There are a couple things you need to look for if you're investigating the foundation. One of the biggest is large cracks or signs of shifting in the foundation. Now, depending on the type of foundation, your house could be formed on just one giant slab of concrete, That's commonly called a slab-on-grade foundation, or you might have actual foundation walls that are built up so that would give you a basement or space underneath the house. In any case, the things you want to look for are water intrusion, so any standing water if you have a crawl space, or any giant cracks in the foundation. That would be indicative that there could be some structural issues with the house. There are other ways that you can find out if there's foundation issues too. What I like to do is, if there's a brick house, for example, is I look for vertical cracks that are running along the sides of the house. These are typically around windows and doors, and it's because as the foundation shifts, it can tilt one way or the other, which causes the whole facade of bricks to shift over to one side or the other. This is going to lead to these long zigzagging cracks down the side of the house, which is an easy way to find out if the foundation has issues or if it's shifted over time. The last thing you want to look for in the foundation of a house is for any signs of termites or termite damage. Typically, you can find out if there's termites by either actively seeing termites that are scrounging around in the house, or you can look for the termite mud tubes. This is how the termites build their little nests and permeate through the house. Termites are an issue that you should not handle on your own. You definitely need professional pest control specialists to handle a termite issue. If you don't take care of your termite issue promptly, they could spread throughout the house and eat away at the foundation and cause structural issues later on. So there you have it. Those are the 5 major mechanical systems of the house that you should check before you buy. As a recap, you want to check the HVAC system, the electrical system, the plumbing system, the roof, and the foundation of the house. Anyone who's buying a home should get a home inspection, and the report can typically be pretty lengthy. But if you stick to those guidelines and you look through that report, you can make some educated decisions on whether or not to move forward with the house or to ask for any seller concessions or credits. If you're interested in finding out more about how to buy a house, what to look for renovations, or other real estate tips, tricks, and hacks, give me a like and a follow, and I'll see you next time.